A very good evening to you all, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to warmly welcome you to the 123rd webinar of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. Today's webinar is the 16th webinar of the 4th webinar series, which focuses on the personal, professional, and career development of membership, conducted on Sundays at 7 p.m. These webinar series are organized by the Seminars Committee, chaired by Secretary BASL, Mr. Rajiv Amarasuriya, with Convener Assistant Secretary, Mr. Pasinda Silva, together with co-conveners, Mr. Pandula Vanyarachi, Mr. Oshan Oberatna, Ms. Nikini Mapitigama, and myself. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Mr. Salia Pires, President's Council, and other members of the Management Committee of the Bar Association for all their support and guidance. Today's topic of discussion is health and wellness for lawyers. I warmly welcome our speaker, Ms. Tisha Vikramatunga, co-founder and CEO of Workout.lk. Tisha is a founder of Workout.lk, a comprehensive health and fitness platform in Sri Lanka that aims to inspire active living while giving credible information and resources all under one platform. Tisha has a keen interest in nutrition, psychology, movement, health sciences, design, and technology. Furthermore, she has gained experiences in areas such as marketing, brand management, and is currently reading as a functional medicine certified health coach USA. Welcome, Tisha. Thank you for coming on board today. If you have any questions, please send in via the Q&A chat box. This session is also live streamed on YouTube. Without further ado, I shall now hand over the session to our panelist. Tisha, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. So thanks a lot, the Bar Association and Rajiv, for initiating this very valuable topic. I think it's very timely given the situation we are facing at the moment. So I will be covering a lot within this half an hour. So you can very intently listen and ask any questions. So I might deep dive into certain aspects that require more explanation. And if anyone has any inquiry, like if it's something too technical or if it's a lingo that you don't understand, feel free to type it on the chat box or inquire at the end. I will be glad to explain it. So I'm going to cover 5 pillars which are fundamental to health, wellness, well-being. Workout.lk is a holistic platform that has been independently being a health, advocating health for the last 5 years. So it's all about giving credible, ethical information to our audiences, the public. So I would love to start off sharing this information. So I will also share a few exercises we can do at the end, but then it will be very information packed, but then you can either look at the slides or not, but then we will go very fast. Like I mentioned, any questions feel free to ask. So I'm gonna start sharing the slides and I hope you can see this. Yeah, so the topic I think is very relevant for pretty much everyone, but I think I will be targeting specifically the lawyers because as you know, everyone is, very sedentary, especially these days. I mean, being a lawyer, I think it's a very sedentary desk job anyway, but I think the pandemic may have exacerbated certain, conditions which are kind of not within our control, but we'll be covering a lot of aspects that you have within your control. So in psychology, there's a concept called locus of control. So the more possibility or probability of you having control over something, so the greater your mental well-being is, right? So I think it's great to cover these aspects. And I have to say, sometimes it might sound like it's a bit far-fetched, that it's, too much of optimizing and that I can't, do all of these 5 pillars or all of these aspects being spoken, but that's really okay. There's no perfect person. I can pretty much guarantee no one will get all of these aspects right. But if you can plant seeds wherever necessary, where I think whenever the context is right or conducive, you will be able to maybe recall and then find the right resources or the professionals to really dive even deeper. So I'm going to cover all of it, but please bad that it's not to say that you have to get all of this right, but these are, I think, vital aspects that we need to really look at, when it comes to holistic health, which is being promoted by Workout LK. And we are going to start with movement, and we'll be covering a lot of things like nutrition, sleep, and many, many other things. So I think I have to mention one of the reasons why the platform also started is because you see in cities, especially like Colombo, we have a very densely packed urban environment, and being in Colombo, I think everyone already faced the problem of sitting. And I think this quote well explains, I mean, this is the world we have moved into, especially the last 20, 25 years, because of the advent of computers and electronics. We have been pretty much sedentary, but also being in a city, this is exacerbated, because if you look at, the amount of time we spend sitting, I mean, this is pre-lockdown, but then if you really look at what's happening now, 24/7, we are pretty much sitting. So we really need to look at what this is doing to our biology, because evolutionarily, we were not like this. If you look at our ancestors, they were really nimble. Maybe their median age was a bit lesser because they were hunter-gatherers, but then if you look at their posture, very upright, very nimble. But you see what happened when people started moving into cities, and when urbanization happened, we saw the picture on the right very commonly. And we thought this was, very normal, that people, everyone gets, when they get old, that they, succumb to this, kyphosis, it's like this hunched back. But it's not really the case. But now if you look at what's happening because of the use of electronics, people as young as, this is just one example. People in their 20s, 30s, we can see this. And sometimes even teenagers have this now. So what used to happen when people are in their 60s, 70s are now happening at this age. I know this is a bit scary, but maybe even funny, but I can guarantee you pretty much, if anyone is using computers, they have it even at certain degree. It's not a reason for to be worried, but I will tell you at the end, because I will share a lot of issues we face with this, but then also I will share a lot of solutions. Of course, we won't talk about problems unless there's solutions. So why is this really important? Because if you look at our spine, all our organs are actually connected to the spine. So if you look at our gallbladder, like D4, stomach, D6, I mean, all of these, the veins going from our spine to these organs, and then the right nutrient delivery is very, very important for the proper functioning of our organs. And we don't really talk about this as much, because it's very important to get this right. And sometimes certain impingements can happen. I mean, people need to also be wary. I mean, not to say that, this is just the one cause, but this is a hugely overlooked factor as well. Proper nutrient delivery is very important, and the spine is important because it does not have a direct blood supply, unlike other places. So it gets this nutrient delivery and fluid through this squeeze expansion cycle, and that naturally happens when we are moving. So walking naturally stimulates this, running or any kind of movement pretty much gives this squeeze and expansion, and that's how these nutrients get delivered within the discs. So this is why it's very, very important. And we are sitting pretty much now 24/7 thanks to these lockdowns, and we need to really look at this factor. And of course, we've been using mobile phones, and each degree of tilt puts pounds of pressures on the thoracic spine. And it's very, very important that you be really look at this, because if you even if you see this Chinese proverb, it's very, very true. It says you are only as old as your spine, and the Chinese have been big advocates of spinal health, and new modalities have been really talking about that as well, like chiropractic, for instance. But then this is absolutely true. Because the spine has the potential to, the more the healthy spine is, the more potential we have to be, full of vitality and health. So one hugely overlooked factor, the one big reason we need to move is to feed our discs. the spinal disc, which I was talking about, because the blood flow can be impeded even by a factor of 10 to 20. I mean, if you're sitting idle. So it's very important that you get this. I mean, I won't go into much detail, but then this is just to give you an idea how it's important, because we are sitting on this pump, and it's very, very important to get this blood flow and nutrient flow going. Another thing that happens when we are sitting a lot is you may have heard of muscle imbalance syndromes. This upper cross syndrome, lower cross syndrome. I mean, these are like muscle imbalance systems that can, it's not that everyone who sits get this. I mean, you can have different, depending on where your biomechanics are affected, how your posture is placed over a long period of time. You can, within a prolonged period, get these kind of imbalances. So, but these are easily correctable. But you need to kind of understand that your spine can get either little bit slight distortions can happen here and there, like if your posterior chain is too tight or your pec muscles are too tight, for instance. I mean, it can move your discs here and there. So it's very important. So this and these things can be properly evaluated by a physiotherapist. So it's very important that you get these checked. But like I said, I mean, pretty much all of us have these in the modern day. But it's not reason to panic, but then it's just to show that these things could happen. And it's not just the shortening of hamstrings. There's a lot of things happening, like tightening of the erector spinae muscle, psoas muscle overworking. I mean, so many different things. Just to give you a very, very rough understanding that the entire kinetic chain works in synergy. And if there is one issue somewhere, it can affect another. So it's it shouldn't be overlooked, because these things have to be corrected, and they can be corrected very early on. So that's where these count exercises come in, because if you are positioned in a incorrect posture for a very prolonged period of time, that's where these imbalances can happen. It doesn't happen overnight, but over months and years. So the best thing you can do, advocated by physiotherapists, is to do these count exercises, and they're the best to give these kind of recommendations based on your specific biomechanics. So you can't say one size fits all, that if you do this, you get corrected. So you have to be properly evaluated by a physiotherapist and then get these recommendations. These exercises are just samples. I mean, you'll find a lot on the net, but then it's not really advisable to do it on your own, because you might be thinking you may have, a posterior pelvic tilt or something, but then it could be anterior. So you need to really evaluate, because all of these muscle groups work in synergy. So you need to really check your individual biomechanics. So shown on the right is the chin tuck, commonly done to a correct kyphosis, and then on the left, you see a very common lunge exercise you can do, because when you're sitting a lot, your psoas muscle gets very tight. So there's also the warrior pose in yoga, which people do a lot. And in the bottom, you see this hip bridge. Obviously, not something you can do when you're at office, but it's something you can do at home. And but the rest you can easily do wherever you are, if you're sitting idle. And on the bottom, you see the scapular adduction exercise, again, recommended a lot by physiotherapists. So there's a lot like this, a lot of solutions to correct these imbalances. So there's a lot of hope, but the key point to remember is you need to get this corrected as soon as possible, meaning the longer you wait, the more, lots of things get affected down the kinetic chain. So it's very, very important, especially if you're young. These are easily preventable and correctable. But the longer you stay, it becomes a little difficult. Not to say that it's not, but depending on how severe it is, you need to really evaluate it. So something very important. Next, I would like to mention a little bit about these therapies available, because if you look at, I mean, there is no, again, one size fits all. There's so many modalities of therapy, like remedial therapy, osteopathy, chiropractic to different myofascial release. So there, you need to really see what works for you, and then based on, again, on a consultation. But you see, it's very important to get these also done on a regular basis, because if you see, our mind and body has a reciprocal relationship, meaning your mind affects your body and your body affects your mind. So any tension that you have in the mind can sometimes be released by just relieving the physical tension. I mean, you've heard of these knots, myofascial knots, trigger points. All of these can happen when you're sitting stagnant for a long time, and not just that, when you're especially in a lockdown situation, you're not moving, and then you're also stressed. You're looking at all the news and TV and catastrophe, whatnot. So obviously, there's a lot of tension being stored in the body. So it's very, very good to, especially these days, to periodically get these sorted out. And these can be done. There's lots of therapists in Colombo, and yeah, just to mention that. And if you look at our posture, so what I mentioned about earlier, the spine, you see even a slight degree, a few degrees of tilt, the picture on the right, you see how the blood flow gets impeded. And this is where sometimes you get conditions like headaches, migraines. Not to say that this is the only cause, but this could be an overlooked factor. So it's very important that we, sit in this 90-90-90 ergonomics. Like proper ergonomics are very important because of this reason, to get the right nutrients, the blood flow, the lymph flow, all going right, so that we have better productivity. Especially as lawyers, we are always, you guys are all sitting constantly reading. So it's very, very important. We advocate this a lot to the tech audiences, but then I think your profession as well is where it's quite critical, because you sit a lot of time. And this is where I focus a lot on movement, because it's something very important you need to look at. And these are, there are lots of things easily preventable that can be prevented by adding little movement routines, which I will also explain to you later. So now this slide might be a bit scary, but just to show you how even the chair can affect your spine. So on the middle, you see a very tall person sitting in a short chair. And then on the right, you see a very short person sitting in a tall chair. So you can see how the spine gets affected here and there. This doesn't happen overnight, of course, with a long period of time. If you neglect these things and have really bad posture, these things can happen. This facet joints and this lumbar curvature can get here and there, and this is where you hear things like herniation and bulging. But don't get too worried. But this doesn't again happen overnight, but over a prolonged period. This is why it's so essential to have good posture. And we have lots of chairs. Featured is a Herman Miller chair. Even if you can't get that, there's so many great qualities of a great chair. Even if you can't get one now, budget constraints maybe, there's always ways to create a good ergonomical workstation, even create props around the chair. And if not, why not maybe even experimental standing desk, because this is something a lot of people do in the West, especially, they go crazy. Like they even do this kind of treadmill desk, but you don't have to go that crazy. You can easily experiment this at home, especially during this time now, and it doesn't have to be fancy or expensive. You can, really experiment with even some books or cardboard boxes. It doesn't cost anything. So as long as you have this 90-90-90 ergonomics going, I think it's a fantastic way to, spend your lockdown work time. And they have found, in fact, that not this ideal balance is what's optimal. So not too much of sitting, not too much of standing. It's just the middle path. So that they have found to be optimal. So they have found people are more productive, they have more energy, they say. So it's just something you can really experiment. I think even if you can have it at the workstation, this is great for people like you who are sitting a lot. And if you can't do that, or you're too shy to do that, the best thing you can do is stretch. Taking stretch breaks every 45 minutes, about 5 minutes, they say is like the optimal. And there's lots of software which helps you do that as well. This is one just software, and you can see like even there are little things you can do, like when you're getting a call, for instance, you can just walk. Like, habituating these little things can do a lot of change over time. But that is the hard one, as we know. right? Because habituating something when we are under stress is very difficult. I mean, there's this famous Greek quote, I think also mentioned a lot by my yoga teacher. It says, in times of crisis, we don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training. So this is, I think, I love this quote because it just shows how much, how important it is to get these habits incorporated, especially when times are conducive, when you're able to really do this, incorporating this will take you a long way, because if you see, these are all little things, but then it accrues over time. So that's why, just like interest, so it's very good if you do have the time now or at some point in future to really look at these overlooked factors. Another great exercise you can do at the desk station is a Tibetan exercise called palming. You can just rub your hands, and I mean, all of you probably know this. This triggers the vagus nerve, and then really gives your eyes a break. So it's really good. You can combine it with some breathing exercise, like maybe 5 counts inhale, 5 counts exhale, or even hold the breath 5-5-5 breathing, or box breathing, or whatever you want. So that's a little hack you can do at the workstation. When it comes to correcting ailments, now this is quite important, because now we saw during the lockdown last year especially, a lot of people got interest in health and fitness. So they started doing crazy workouts because they wanted to shed those pounds which were accumulating over a period of time. So they went a little bit overboard. I mean, not to say that it's a bad thing. I mean, great to start new things, but this is something which is not really communicated. It's very, very important, especially if you haven't had good conditioning, physical conditioning, or if you haven't been an athlete, or if you haven't done any exercises in a long time, or never in your life for decades. It's very important that you get your biomechanics properly assessed, corrected, like I said, through rehab exercises, especially by a physiotherapist or a doctor, and then install the new pattern. So break a bad pattern before installing a new one, just like getting a virus off your hard drive before installing a new operating system, for instance. Very, very important, something people hugely overlook. And let's say you're really interested in, starting a workout. How best to start it? I mean, walking is the most natural thing you have at your disposal. And this is something humans have been doing for millennia. You can't go wrong with it. I mean, if you are able to do it, sometimes it can even correct some imbalances over time. So something very accessible and doable. And if you can do it in nature, even more fantastic. Because now there's a lot of science. It was again before woo-woo, or there wasn't much. People knew by intuition that there's something great about nature, but people didn't really understand like how important it is to really do movements, or even spend time in nature. Ironically, this is something not really accessible to us. Hopefully, it will in the very near future, after this lockdown eases. So even if you can't go out interprovincial, like a long distance, there's always a park nearby. I mean, we have even in Colombo a few parks, walk parks as well. Why not utilize it? Great, because when you get exposed to these natural environments, the soil, the microbes, the bacteria, the fungi, all of that, it sounds yucky, but then if it's really important for immune upregulation, especially valid for this pandemic time, because it's very, very important that we get exposed to these to build our immune resilience. Because if we are in a very sterile environment, that is not helping us exercise our immunity. Our immune cells do not get the right information, the mRNA from the environment. And there's so much of science, like this negative ions and all of this coming up. It's not woo-woo anymore. So there's a lot happening in nature. So if you can do exercise in nature, fantastic. And even better if you have sunlight exposure, especially very important during these times, because even they have found COVID critical patients having low serum vitamin D levels. So if you can get natural sunlight, this is very essential, especially living in Sri Lanka. We have a lot of access do get your half an hour, 1 hour at different times of the day, because the sunlight, the quality of this is very different to the vitamin D pills you get from food or supplements. It's not the same at all. There's a lot going on. I mean, even new science finding out new molecules like sulfate, like affecting, it's not the same as vitamin D that you get from pills. So it's very, very important. And also the wavelengths, the UV, AV, how it's affecting our melatonin cycle, the serotonin cycle. I mean, I know it might be a bit new to you, but it just shows everything is, the sun is it plays a big role in our health, well-being, and lots of things like the mood upregulation as well, vitamin D, even for serotonin, like one of our neurotransmitters for serotonin upregulation as well. They have found sunlight is very important. Another easy thing you can do is, this is called earthing or grounding. This is, again, people say it's woo, but then now there's a lot of evidence coming up showing how it can even reduce your inflammation if you have chronic pains, chronic fatigue, or even things like pains, aches and pains. This can, I mean, you need to really properly lie on the ground. So if you have a garden, fantastic. I mean, if you're in an apartment, that's a bit tough, but maybe you can just go to a nearby park and just try lying on the ground for half an hour, 1 hour. You'll see, I mean, you have to do this regularly, of course, perfect if you have a garden. It can really ease out some inflammation in the body. It's something you can try out. And body weight exercises is something easily doable and again, very beginner friendly. So if you are a beginner, especially, you need to first ideally start with body weights. And there's a lot of modalities out there, functional fitness, Pilates to yoga. And yoga is actually very great because you see, it's one of the most efficient workouts available. So we promote over 7 kind of activities, but then you see, yoga hits all 3 cylinders. So it has breath, mindfulness, and movement all together in one. So this is where you get more bang for buck. So it's working on your hormonal system, your neurotransmitters, your physique, your the circulation, the energy, everything, right? And then it's a really effective system, and there's different types available. You have to choose what works for you. And like what is being shown in the West, yoga is not a fitness activity. It's actually a far deeper science. But there's lots of other things as well. I mean, if you don't like yoga, I mean, there's so many other things like Tai Chi or Qigong, which is very senior friendly as well. So you see it's, again, hitting those 3 pillars. A lot of breath, the breathing, mindfulness is involved in it to really put your state in a very rest and digest mode. So this is called the parasympathetic system in our ANS. So we have the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic. So sympathetic simply means fight or flight. And this is exactly where we are, especially if you're a lawyer, you're on constant fight or flight. So your body is ready to, handle the next challenge, whether it's a mental battle or, work, a project, whatever it is. So this is why, I mean, not just lawyers, pretty much everyone in our modern, corporate structures, but then if you can get your system into this opposite, that is the parasympathetic rest and digest mode, this is really important because this is where you will be able to find that yin and yang balance. Because if you look at our society, it's very yang dominant, meaning a lot of fire, like a lot of activity, a lot of adrenaline, a lot of cortisol, all these stress hormones. That's where you need to counterbalance it, like in everything in life, you need to balance it out. So the counterbalance is these yin activities, the meditation, and the parasympathetic, the Tai Chi, the Qigong, and whatnot. So why is this important? I think as we go through all 4 pillars, you will understand how everything is interlinked. If you look at something like even breathing, something as simple as that. So this puts us easily in a state of parasympathetic mode. So this rest and digest, right? And it activates a vagal tone. So a vagus nerve is now a lot of science coming out. I mean, we even did some workshops with a few professionals. So it's again gaining traction because this is like correlated with a lot of, disease prevention to stress reduction. I mean, so many things. You can find out about it as well. But then there's so many activities that can activate this. And meditation and breathing, something as simple as breathing, is where you can really access and trigger this vagus nerve. So that means to get into your system, into rest and digest. So if you look at, that's a little bit about some of the things you can do. And the AHA recommends this. That's very, easily doable. It's about 3 hours of moderate aerobic exercise and about 1 hour of intense exercise. That's the recommendation per week. If you want to, but this is the bare minimal. It doesn't mean you are okay. You can be a weekend warrior, but then what they mean is just as frequently as possible. I mean, it doesn't need to be 3 times a week or whatever. As much as possible, keep moving. That is the central message. So if you look at one of the other things that happen with movement, so I'm giving you lots of good reasons now, is that it upregulates neurotransmitters like serotonin, what I mentioned, and dopamine, not just endorphins, but GABA, all of this stuff, either harmonize, balance out, or if it's deficient, it gets, replenished. So all of this happens with movement. And if it's a fun activity, like a sport or a dance or whatever it is, but that you like, even better. So there's a lot of science now coming out on how this is affecting our mood. All good news. And this is probably something you've seen. This is just the brain activation on the right shown just after a 20-minute walk. So very important, especially if you have children and you want to get them to, sit for the next exam with good results. I think a lot of the old, the classical mode of teaching was to just tell the students to sit in one place and start learning. But we know now that's not the case. There's a lot of brain activity happening, and they've even found how you can even increase your IQ points, this brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So great for forming memory, and also if you have even certain deficiencies. I mean, over time, there's a lot of people who have fixed certain ailments just by movement. I mean, that's going a little deeper, but another great thing. Another great reason to start moving is because you see there is a natural innate defense mechanism against pathogens like viruses, bacteria, and fungi. Guess what it is? Yes, you guessed it. It's movement. So guess what? Exercise triggers something called, there's NK cells, a part of the, it's a lymphocyte, a part of the white blood cells. And this is one of the best natural innate mechanisms we have to fight against things like viruses, pathogens, all kinds. And sadly, this is not communicated in the mass media, but this is very true. You can even Google this up and find out. This is why it's so crucial, especially now, if you're very sedentary, and especially during the last lockdown. I think this messaging needs to be more prevalent to tell people that you need to incorporate movement, especially during this time. So that was a lot about movement. So because it's important, especially for lawyers, I covered some multiple angles there. Now this one, the sleep pillar, is something I know would be a bit tough because, as we know, a lot of people wasn't able to have proper sleep, probably, given all the situations that happened. But we know now how, using electronic devices, especially just before bed, is not good. So they recommend a few hours before just to turn off, because you see the blue light is from coming out, emitting from these electronic devices are very different from what we were exposed to naturally, our ancestors. So the orange light is, you can actually induce it. There are some software as well, like this Flux. Some new operating systems have this inbuilt. So if you create this orange hue, even in your the lighting systems, or even your electronic devices, that's great, because you can actually counter this lot of blue light coming in into your retina. because you see the sunlight, like I mentioned, it's implicated in the circadian rhythm, that is our bio clock. So this regulates everything. So our entire metabolic processes are regulated by, the sunlight coming in, and that's why even sun exposure for a few days can reset your bio clock, for instance. I mean, this slide might be a bit scary to some. You can look at it if you are you want to learn more. So they have actually found that even, because what happens with sleep is that the brain, I mean, this is new research just found out in the last few years, I think about 2 years, that the brain through the lymphocytes clears toxins, and it happens in these waves, the 4 sleep stages. So if you don't get enough sleep or quality sleep, this mechanism can be a little bit impaired, and over time it can lead to certain neuroinflammation conditions. So this is another, scary factor to get, proper sleep. And like I mentioned, these modalities, like anything that gets you into this parasympathetic rest and digest mode, like meditation, breathing, Qigong, yoga, are fantastic. And there are lots of ways. So, but I understand it's sometimes important given the work and all what's happening. It's a bit difficult to get sleep, but you can try to incorporate all of this and see what works. And even your workstation, if you can add a little bit of greenery, I think it's great because it gives this natural element. And even they found this EMF can be absorbed by some of these plants as well, and even toxins, benzene, VOCs, etc. So moving on to the next pillar, I mean, all of these pillars we can go into detail, but given the time, we'll be going through it, it's just so that you can give yourself reminders. I mean, maybe some of you already do some of these, but then it's always good to remind yourself and also see where you're maybe lagging or certain missing components. Nutrition is actually something we have a lot of control of. Like I said, the locus of control. And even if you don't get proper sleep or movement, this is something you pretty much have a lot of control, what you put into the body. And now this is not about bacteria, but yeah, it's all about the entire microbiome. This slide, I want to just mention, I mean, we've spoken extensively with specialists in the gut health, but I'm just giving you an overview here. So there's about 3 to 4 pounds of bacteria, fungi are all of these, microorganisms in your gut and other areas in your body. And this is a huge number. I mean, even more than human cells, we have these microbes. So we are living in harmony with all of these species. So our genome is also, a big chunk of it is these foreign agents. So the right delicate balance is very important. So you can't have too much of pathogenic bacteria or fungi in your system. And this actually can be controlled by the food you eat. So this is fantastic news, isn't it? Because you have a lot of control over the composition of your microbiome just by what you put into your mouth. And Hippocrates said over 3,000 years ago that all disease starts in the gut. And he also showed how, pretty much all disease and even a cure lies in the gut health. So just the last 10, 20 years, over the West, there's been a lot of frontier, research, but I think in Sri Lanka, it's very new here. But people, we featured a lot of people, specialists here who are kind of advocating that because it's hugely overlooked once again. And now we know even our mental health, like 90% of our serotonin receptors, for instance, are in your gut. And if you look at 80%, like they say about approximately 80% of your immune cells are also lying in your gut. So this is highly, highly implicated even during these times, because if you have, control of 80% of your immunity, that's pretty much, the end of the whole situation we are facing now. So this is why it's important that we look at our digestion, nutrition, and the right amount of stomach acidity is very important. Now, I know this might sound a bit strange because some of you might be taking antacids, but this is not really a great idea, because the stomach actually needs to be very acidic. I mean, there's a lot of new more frontier medical research, scientists showing how this is important. And when we are stressed, actually our stomach acidity gets low, because like I mentioned, the fight or flight system gets all the blood flow into the periphery, so that we can run if we are getting attacked by a tiger. But then the organs get blood depleted in blood flow. So this is why you need to be really in a calm state of mind to get your digestive system really in optimal function. And we don't do that now, because we rush to work, or grab something on the way and just eat mindlessly, or don't even chew. This is really not good, because the entire process of from smell to the chewing, everything activates the enzymes, the pancreatic enzymes, to everything. The entire process is very important, and do it slowly. So when we are stressed, another thing that happens is that we reach out for something pretty unnecessary, and that is, yes, sugar. Well, it's pretty ironic, because this is the worst thing we can reach out to, but we do, because when we're stressed, we need more energy, and our body is not capable of getting the right resources to get the energy. But over time, this can be a tricky time out, because now there's a lot of evidence showing how sugar can cause a lot of inflammation all throughout the body, systemic inflammation. I mean, this doesn't happen again overnight, over a prolonged period of time. Really not good to have this, because I know this quote by Dr. Robert Lustig may sound a bit complex, but all what he's saying is that you can get pretty addicted to this, and you can't blame yourself or your willpower, because there's a lot going on biochemically. And this is very true. I mean, we know now that most of these ultra-processed foods are chemically altered, so that we pretty much crave for it. So talking about things you can avoid, I'll mention a few things that if you really want to get your digestion right and everything rebalanced again, something you should really avoid is ultra processed foods. Again, highly correlated with NCDs nowadays. So there's a lot of research backing that up as well, and a lot of advocates here also talking about it. And we really can't sometimes even trust these nutritional facts. There's a lot of hidden sugars, like E numbers, a lot of toxins, even not really communicated, and a lot of people even market healthy food as, but which is not really healthy. So you need to be really mindful and know what you're putting in. Another thing you can really avoid is wheat flour. Okay, this one is tough, because this is so pervasive in our country, sadly. But this is, again, a lot of people don't realize that gluten sensitivity is not just for celiacs, but there's also non-digestion related gluten sensitivity, meaning that if you have this wheat flour or gluten, you can still have symptoms, like maybe in other systems, like maybe your memory might get impaired, maybe your joint healing is impaired. So you just need to test out. Maybe you can take out wheat flour products for about a week or two and see if this works for you. And I can guarantee you pretty much everyone or lots of people will see lots of benefits. And this has happened to many. So wheat flour is not something important. And milk as well, again, not required for us, although marketed as such. And that's something you can avoid. And if you really can experiment with plant-based, or, not to say that you need to go vegan or vegetarian, but just reducing the animal products that you consume has a big impact on the environment. As we know, I mean, they say approximately 20 to 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions are caused by the livestock industry. And you can say, I mean, they say about 45% of the agri land, 1/3 of the fresh water consumption. I mean, there's a big carbon footprint attached to this animal agriculture industry. So if you can reduce it, you will see, you will get a lot of benefits not just for the planet, but also for yourself. A lot of people have seen great results just by reducing that consumption. I mean, just a little thing, note for you to just be mindful also of the oils that you put in and the fats, because fats are kind of demonized, but it actually, you need to get the right fats in by nuts, avocados, and the omega-3 oils are the ones that you need to look out for, and avoid the omega-6, which are highly inflammatory, and trans fats. So stress demands a lot of nutrients dense foods, and being doing a job that requires a lot of mental work, this demands a lot of nutrient dense foods, and a lot of metabolic cofactors, meaning vitamins and minerals are very, very important for the proper functioning. And these deficiencies don't happen in the short period, but it can accrue over time. So some of the things listed here are just a few. I mean, it's not all, but vitamin C, like magnesium, is highly deficient in our foods now. B vitamins especially get depleted when you're in a highly stressed work space. When you're in a highly stressed state. So omega-3s are anti-inflammatory, and then there's lots of other things you can add in as well. Also, I need to mention, when you mention these nutrients, you need to make sure you get it from natural sources. So the synthetic compounds have a very different chemical constituency. It's not comparable to the natural vitamin C you get from orange, mandarin, or nelly, for instance. So it's very, very different. I mean, it comes with entire enzyme complex, vitamin P, KJ, I mean, tyrosine, we don't even know what's in there. But ascorbic acid is only about 5% of the outer cover. So it's really not a good thing to say that, you can just get the same effects from all these supplements. So it's, and getting these vital nutrients are very easy from natural diet. And getting your phytonutrients are very, very important. So all of these colors of the rainbow are very important. There's a lot of nutritionists now talking about, eating the rainbow. Again, very true, because all of these have structure function relationships, meaning, like, for instance, your like anthocyanins are great for cerebral function, lutein great for preventing macular degeneration, for eye health, for instance. So there's a lot coming in from these plant compounds, and scientists are only starting to find out the benefits of this. So it's very, very important to get these material in, and it doesn't have to be expensive food. It can be your very cheap local food. It doesn't have to be what's touted in the West, like broccoli or kale. You don't need access to that. It's just eating simple local herbal medicinal food. And there's also now research coming out how certain micronutrients are seen to be depleted in COVID critical patients as well. So these are some of them, not all, but you can see the importance of this even in immune upregulation. So we don't really talk about it, but it's really very, very important. And this is why this microbiome diversity and then all of these foods coming in are very, very important for your daily diet, because all of these have a lot of implications in our immune cells, like your T cell generation, your antibody generation, all of these as well. And even sleep, like I couldn't mention, all of these regenerate when you are sleeping, the antibodies to white blood cells. So very, very important aspect. And Hippocrates mentioned this, and very, very true, absolutely true. He was the pioneer and the advocate of this, and then now a lot of integrative specialists are now advocating all of the benefits of this. And if you see, our traditional Sri Lankan diet was very, very much full of these phytonutrients. It had a great balance, and grains are kind of demonized again, but then a lot of the blue zones, if you see, they're carbohydrate rich. Nothing wrong with carbohydrates. It's just the right carbohydrate. And getting these, our ancestors, they had all of these incorporated, and we had over 200 edible greens. So all of these had different medicinal properties. So the Sri Lankan diet, a traditional diet, is really fantastic. And like I mentioned, it's not expensive and easily accessible to all of us here. And something very accessible to us are all of these herbs, now touted to be superfoods in the West, like things like curcumin, which is kaha or turmeric, are marketed the best superfoods and all of that. But we have these readily available here, like ginger, turmeric, cloves, garlic, oregano. I mean, all of these, fennel too, whatnot. I mean, all of these have different properties, like antimicrobial, antiviral, antifungal, all of that. But again, you see, you can't have one thing and say this will prevent this disease or that pathogen or etc. It doesn't work like that. So there's no one concoction or pill or shortcut that can upregulate immunity. But you need to have all of this, and sometimes you need to really look at all of these lifestyle factors. Not just food, but as you see, as you've seen, like 80% of our immunity lies in the gut. So there's a big role played by all of these nutritional aspects. So this is why I focused a little bit more on this. And you can have, simple, easy hacks if you, even at your workspace when you're working, you don't have time. You don't probably even have time to cook these when you're running for a meeting or a client meeting. So you can just have fruits, portable fruits like apple and banana, fantastic, instead of these unhealthy snacks, cakes or teas. And you can just experiment with yourself. You can, start incorporating this or adding, even eliminating if possible. First, you can experiment with it, try it out, and you will see a difference for yourself. So I just gave you a big overview. The next thing, again, very important, is to look at this is, I would say, number one factor that affects the entire, well-being aspect. So if you don't have this right, everything else goes out the window, right? We all know that. So it's very, very important that we, seek the right assistance. And if you don't have even access, there's so many organizations, volunteer organizations helping you out. But also having this community aspect, relationships are very, very important. Having healthy relationships is a big cushioning against all of these diseases, stress, mental health, even immune regulation. There's a lot of science coming out. So even if you can't have it, there's sometimes, online tools and even chatbots like AI available. But if not, there are always volunteer organizations. Listed here are a few. I'm sure you know of all of them. But again, very, very important factor, focusing on this mental health, the tough one again. And well, coming into work-life balance, pretty tough one, because we've all, we work very hard, especially during the last year. But there's lots of science coming out showing how, working more than 10 hours a day is not really a good idea. It's correlated with so many issues. So again, just so you know that working smart, not hard, is the way to go. And this is the tough one where you need to really look at, how to hack the system. And again, all these factors I mentioned are the factors that give you more productivity, more energy. The food factor, the movement factor, all of these. It doesn't happen overnight. These are little habituations that you can do to get even your work productivity levels up. So very, very important, not working more than 50 hours if you value your health. And if you look at, I think the pandemic really kind of showed us how important this bottom pillar of the Maslow's hierarchy is. That is your foundation, safety, health, food, sleep aspect, all what we covered today during our talk. Very, very crucial, because if you don't have that foundation right, we saw how, especially during the last year, nothing what you build on top really matters. Everything crumbles down if you don't have this foundational pillar right. So this is one big reason why it's very, very crucial to get all of these aspects. I mean, you can't get everything right, but if you can plan to incorporate some of these aspects into your daily life, and even preemptively plan how you can look at incorporating this in times to come, even if this context or situation doesn't allow it now. I think it gives you a huge cushioning to handle any kind of external stresses that come in our way, and especially as I think as an individual, it's very important to have this, all of this imbalance, because it affects our community. And you see, all of these aspects, even we spoke about, has a big synergistic value, meaning nothing works in isolation. So even if you look at immunity, we saw how sleep affects it, the food affects it, your mental health. So all of these things need to be looked at. So this is why there's actually no shortcut or hack or pill or concoction or anything that kind of helps. So this is why also these simple things, I mean, most of them are very simple if you look at it, but they're also sometimes the most hardest to incorporate. So this is why people, professionals, experts come into play, and they help you, guide along your healthy journey. So it's very, very important to have all of this in balance. I mean, wherever you don't have balance, I mean, we can't always have that, but we can counter it in certain ways, overcompensate in some ways what we are missing in another aspect. So very important to have this balance, and it's a tough one given the situation we are facing now, and also general work. I think as lawyers, it's very tough to balance the work and life. But if you can do that, you see big leaps of improvements in productivity. And because after all, you're giving a lot out to the society. You're doing great, very, very valuable work. And if you are not physically able, or if your well-being is affected, you cannot give it out to the world. So before you pour out anything out, pour out your energy out into the world, you need to make sure you have that within you. And that is what is most sustainable. And even if we saw during the pandemic, self-care became very important, because when you take care of yourself collectively, you are also helping society cope up with these kind of pressures that come in, whether it's pandemic or any kind of external stress or work stress or anything that is, you are better equipped to handle it. So this is the message I leave you with by Jim Rohn, it says, take care of your body, because that's the only place you live in. So with that, I'm gonna end the talk segment of the seminar today, workshop. So this is the number. If anyone has any questions, feel free to inquire. If you want to go in deep, you can ask any questions as well. So we, like you saw today, given the 1 hour time period, we covered a lot, but also we can go deeper later on. But then I kind of gave you summary of aspects you can really look at, some overlooked factors, and also things which you may be missing or which you may have never thought of. So I hope this really helps. I can also show a little exercise we can do at the workstation. And if you have any questions, like Anne mentioned, you can just type in the chat box and we can clarify any of that.
Tisha, we have 2 questions. Should I read them to you?
Yes, Anne.
Most people do night reading using devices such as Kindle, iPads, etc. by turning on night mode of the device. Any research findings on the effects of using devices night mode?
Good question. Yeah, thanks, Anne. Well, it's very true. Like I mentioned, it's very, very important that we take off any blue light, because like I said, it's very unnatural to the retina, because we were exposed to orange light and, well, a little bit of blue light with the moon and the starlight naturally in a natural setting. But this has very high bandwidth, and it's very concentrated. The pixel density, for instance, is very high. So it's really stimulating the brain. And also, like I wanted to mention, especially as lawyers, I think you are very cerebral. You're using your intellectual capacity a lot. So that's a lot of prefrontal cortex or this beta wave activity. So that's why it's important to really look at, looking at ways you can calm your system down, because this beta waves are really keeping you alert, and also using the devices. Using the devices will actually get you into this high alert activity. It gets your sympathetic system, which I mentioned about, very active, where when it comes to sleep, you need to get your rest and digest, or the parasympathetic mode, active. That's where, there are sleep rituals just a few hours before, getting your body temperature a bit low, not doing any exercises, eating 3 to 4 hours before. So there are lots of things, that helps quality sleep. And one pivotal thing is to getting this blue lights off. And they recommend ideally 30 to, at least 3 hours. So if you can, even 2 hours before, just turn your phone on night mode, or airplane mode, or whatever it is, and then it will be much better. This is a bit hard, but with practice, I can guarantee you it can be done. I hope that answered the question. There's a lot of research on it. Yeah, you can Google PubMed as well.
The next question is, doctors advise 30 minutes duration for exercise. Do you differ?
Oh, it's very variable depending on your lifestyle. No one size fits all, like I mentioned, and it's very much based on the individual's, energy expenditure, caloric requirements. Calorie counting, I don't really recommend, but then if you, unless you're an athlete and you have, performance objectives, but for a layman, it's just simple intuitive eating, but it really depends. So what they really now say is micro moments, not a concentrated chunk like what the weekend warriors do, but adding as much movement as possible during the day, throughout the day. So little bouts of activity throughout the day, because if you look at our ancestors, that's what we did when we are, hunting, gathering, or going plucking a fruit or something like that. We didn't, maybe we chased deer for like one day, but then we did a lot of activity. So going from here and there. So we don't have that in the modern world. So that's where, it all depends, but the more the better. So if you can do more than 30, fantastic, because there's also saturation point. So if you keep on doing 30 minutes every day, there will come a point, maybe in 1 month or 2 months, your body has kind of, built that tolerance. So you have to keep doing more to get the benefits. So the more the merrier.
And how often do you recommend people to schedule a workout during the week? How many days?
Again, depends on, the AHA, like I mentioned, recommends at least 3 times, 3 to 4 hours a week, but that's a bare minimal, and it doesn't really do anything to many people. So if you can do every day, small, half an hour, 1 hour, or every other day if you're doing intense workouts, more the merrier. So if you're doing something like walking, you can do a lot, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers. Given your capacity, you shouldn't suddenly do 15 km or run a marathon if you've been sitting ducks for three decades. But you can slowly start building that tolerance and endurance. But bare minimum, about 3 to 4 hours. So that really doesn't cut it though.
Do you recommend, because Sri Lankan rice and curry is the main source of meal, so do you recommend people to stick by it or go to a more extreme, cut down carbohydrates sort of lifestyle?
Yeah, good question. That's actually a big myth now in our culture. Everyone thinks Sri Lankan food is bad, and we consider Sri Lankan food to be fried rice. Fried rice is now a Sri Lankan traditional diet. That was a foreign invasion. But if you look at our traditional Sri Lankan diet, it was full of the grains like kadala, mungata, cowpea, and rice also was there for a few centuries. I think the Asian belt predominantly had a rice cultivation agrarian society for about 10,000 years. So our genetics are kind of optimized for carbohydrates. far more than, I would say, more European or certain indigenous populations. So I think the Asian belt, if you're in Sri Lanka, and you need to see what your ancestors had, and that is rice and curry. So that's really optimal. Nothing bad with carbs, absolutely not. Your microbes, like I mentioned earlier, they require prebiotics and probiotics, and that comes from carbohydrates. So it's very, very important that you get that into your diet. If you are carbohydrate deficient, that's not a good thing to do.
I think a lot of people try to cut out rice and curry and try to follow a very westernized diet, thinking that will be better suited for their lifestyle. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, it all depends on the person. Some people do, and I mean, if they have certain conditions and they go on a keto or very extreme carbohydrate restricted diet for a certain period, I mean, it should be for a phase. It should be for a a certain period of time, but it ideally now they don't recommend long term because I mean, any fad crazy diet, they don't recommend long term. I mean, as soon as the objective is achieved, you should normalize it back again. So even elimination diet or whether it's keto, you do it for a certain period, you gain the benefit. Maybe it's glucose regulation or whatever it is, brain function, whatever it is, and then go back to normal ancestral diet, ideally.
Tisha, you had some desk exercises that you wanted to demonstrate to us.
Yes, and so actually you'll find a lot on the net as well. And I would ideally recommend you to go visit a physiotherapist because, like I said, like maybe you have kyphosis, maybe lordosis, or maybe something else. Maybe it's just, a localized, imbalance. So you need to really look at fixing those before you do anything. But I can just show you some general things that, work for everyone, especially when you're sitting, in a work chair. I mean, there are lots of little things you can do easily. I mean, with the wrists and shoulders, especially. I'll just, briefly guide you. But then these things you can find on the net as well. We won't have much time to go into detail. But then just for you to get an idea, but highly, highly recommend you get a prescription from a physiotherapist because those people will be able to correctly assess you and then guide you properly. So I'm just going to show you some, I mean, all this, the shoulder rotations, like you can do 1, 2, 3. I mean, these are just breaks you can do. Like I mentioned, every 45 minutes, if you can take 5-minute break. I mean, it can be just standing up and shaking your body or, just doing any kind of movement to get that spinal pump, activated, and then also getting the blood flow, the lymph flow with lymphatic drainage, very important again, to clear the toxins and all of that, especially when you're working in a project and you're highly stressed, you don't want, all of this adrenaline, cortisol kind of building up in your muscles. So, and another thing you can do is the wrist exercises. So you can just keep your arms like this. And then, I mean, this, I think is based on Tai Chi and Qigong warm-ups. They do this a lot. Again, great for your carpal tunnel, to prevent carpal tunnel, like, stretching like this. You probably know this, just holding and doing that. And then you have the trapezius stretch, where you can, I mean, you should be very careful with this because a lot of people have tight trapezius. You shouldn't suddenly do crazy movements. So be very, very gentle and mix it with the breath ideally. So exhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then inhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not like that, right? So even when you're doing the shoulder rotation, the neck rotations. So sometimes people do it like, I mean, I've seen, people do crazy movements, but then you have to be very slow. Like, for instance, I've learned from these Upayoga teachers, they do this very slowly and they combine it with the breath. So they start like this, inhale 1, 2, 3. And sorry, you start from down, inhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then again, exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very, very slowly, doing it as slowly as possible at both sides, counterclockwise and clockwise. Very, very slowly, and combining it with the breath. So then you have 2 in 1, right? You're doing a little breath awareness as well as the movement. And another thing you can do, I mean, there are lots of things like this Qigong exercise where you Inhale and exhale. You exhale out everything, all the air, and then you inhale. I mean, I don't have much time to go into the mechanics, but then I can send if anyone's interested. But there are so many things, like even in Upayoga, there's to just, activate your nerves in the arms and the tendons. You can do this kind of inward, outward rotations. This I learned from my Upayoga teacher. You can do it forward, forward, upward, downward, and sideways. This is a Upayoga arm exercise frequently done. And then, like I said, the palming exercise, you can do easily at the chair. And even this Ching tuck, I mean, again, you need to ideally go to a physiotherapist and check if you have certain imbalance, you should do it. The scapular adduction and things like that. And then if you're, I mean, I can't show it now, but then you can just Google the chair pose in yoga. Again, great to activate the posterior chain and even some stability in the core. For instance, it's like a half squat, but you can do this. Yoga people know it. Yoga teachers can guide you on that. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Tisha. On behalf of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka Seminars Committee, I would like to thank you, Tisha, for the very informative and valuable session filled with a lot of useful tips that can be incorporated within our lifestyle and reminding us that balance is very important. I would also like to thank all of you who have joined us today through Zoom and YouTube, and for your questions that have made this webinar an interesting one. Thank you, everyone. Join us again on Sunday for another webinar on a different topic. Thank you. Good night.